Hello, everyone. This is Amy here, the editor of Austin Common, and today we're going to be talking about climate change. I'm going to go ahead and we've got a special guest who's going to be with us. Go ahead. We're just here. And so we have Luke Metzger from Environment Texas is logging on right now, and we're going to be talking about some recent climate change developments here in Austin. Hey, Luke.
Hi, Amy. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you bet. Glad to be on.
So basically, I was just kind of setting the scene here. Um, in Austin, we had a big announcement that came out earlier this week. Kind of some negative news around our climate goals here. Austin Energy, our city's electric utility, announced that we weren't going to be able to kind of retire our portion of a coal plant here in Austin. I want to set the scene a bit. This is all about Fayette coal power plant. Explain what that is, because I think a lot of people don't even know where that is or what that is or kind of its contribution to our climate change picture here in Austin.
Sure. Yeah, I think people have probably seen it if they've driven on Highway 71 from Austin to Houston, the big, four smokestacks, spewing pollution into the community right there in Fayette County near LaGrange. And yeah, this is a coal-fired power plant, and Austin gets part of our electricity from that plant. It's co-owned by the city of Austin and the Lower Colorado River Authority, or LCRA. And but we get about a third of the electricity from that plant, which in turn is a significant source of our electricity and a very significant source of global warming pollution. It's responsible for about 80% of the global warming pollution coming from all of the power plants in Austin Energy's portfolio. And since the city has set bold climate goals, to basically get to zero carbon by 2040, there's basically no scenario where that plant can stay open, or our portion of it can stay open, and for us to meet our climate goals.
Right. And so this is something that closing down Fayette, or at least our portion of Fayette, has been um, something that I know has been a goal with activists and with a lot of community members of the city of Austin for years, years and years. And it's tricky because there is this like weird ownership of it. Like we don't own the whole thing. So
Right.
can you talk a little bit about some of the how we got to where we are today? Because this is something that people have been working on trying to shut this coal plant down for a while.
Yeah, no, I remember, yeah, back in '08, '09, we were, our organization was canvassing on this and calling on the city to either sell it or shut it down, recognizing that, there were these legal complications that didn't allow us just cleanly shut it down entirely. But yeah, the community from lots of different organizations have been engaged in this, and we're able to get the city council to pass a resolution committing to get out of the coal-fired power plant, um, and so we've been relying on negotiations with the LCRA to determine about how would we get out of our share. And so then just a couple of days ago, we learned that the negotiations broke down with LCRA, and apparently LCRA has just been setting really unreasonable demands in terms of letting us out of the contract. And so as a result, yeah, the negotiations just came to a halt. I saw Councilmember Greg Casar just a few minutes ago kind of put out a statement, saying that this is unacceptable, and we're going to keep working hard to make sure we can get out of the plant. But definitely, it's a setback right now.
Yeah, and I know we don't have a ton of details about this. I read the press release and it's very vague. It just kind of said, like you mentioned, that negotiations broke down and it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. But can you explain at all? Do you have any idea about like just some of the bureaucracy behind this? Because I think it's very confusing for people to be like, our city council said we want to get out of it. Austin Energy said they were going to work on getting us out of it. Like, why can we not just like sell or close down something we own? Like, what has been the pushback?
Yeah, yeah. The only kind of analogy I can think of is like if you split up with your, your partner and you have to divide up the house, right? And like, it's not always very clear about who owns what, and and what agreement you're going to come to. Two of you might really like, the TV or whatever, and it sounds like, at least from what Greg Kassar, a council member, said, is that LCRI is not being very constructive in wanting to have this amicable separation, and isn't just letting us out of this deal. It doesn't really make sense. I think part of the problem is that the city of Austin has been able to sell a lot of the surplus electricity onto the broader Texas market in ERCOT, and has made a lot of money from that. And I think also with the winter storm, the blackouts in February, I think there's a lot of interest in having, selling electricity over the winter. But yeah, you would think that that would lead LCRA to be like, you don't want this plant, we'll take it. We can sell, we can make a lot of money on this plant. But because the negotiations are confidential, we just don't know exactly what LCRA is saying, and why they're not allowing it. I mean, I guess people should know that the LCRA board of directors is appointed by Governor Abbott, who is not a strong advocate of climate action, and in fact, falsely blamed wind and solar for the blackouts in February, and is a strong booster of fossil fuels. So that's who we're negotiating with, is a department that does not share our vision for climate action, does not share our vision for getting off of fossil fuels. And that may be, influencing those negotiations.
Right. And so just to recap here for people who are joining on, Austin has one coal-fired power plant left in our portfolio of how we get energy. And there's been a long push to retire it, shut it down, but we don't own the whole thing. And so negotiations had to happen with the Lower Colorado River Authority. And on Monday, Austin Energy announced that we would not be able to get out of that contract. And I think the goal was for it to happen soon, like next year was the original timeline for that. And my understanding too, that might contribute to this, is I thought Austin kind of had prioritized that we didn't just want to sell our portion and have someone else generate, but we actually wanted to like lower the capacity at that plant, because like in reality, just selling it to someone else, it still might be producing energy. We wanted to like truly retire. I think we own a third of the plant or half of it.
Yeah, we own half of two of this. There's, I think, three smokestacks, and I think we own half of two of the smokestacks. We don't even own a full smokestack ourselves, so that's why it makes it a little bit more complicated, right? But yeah, no, you're right. No, the ideal scenario is that the whole plant closes. The better scenario is at least one of the units of the three, plants close entirely, and then a less good but still better than we're in now is we at least take the money we were spending on this coal plant and invest it in renewables, right? So that we still get some climate benefit out of coming out of the plant, even if it stays open, and could be smart, from just a long-term planning perspective, when you just recognize that the Environmental Protection Agency under President Biden is proposing a whole set of new rules around power plant pollution. That may lead that plant to have to install a bunch of expensive pollution controls. It may be that it's actually not even just economically a good investment for the city of Austin. Probably better just to cut our losses, get out of that thing now. That's certainly better for the climate, but also might be better for ratepayers down the road.
Right. And so we have this Fayette plant. Another thing that was mentioned in the announcement by Austin Energy is that they still plan on retiring some natural gas units at Decker. Do you want to just describe for people who don't really know what that is? That's like another one of our sources of, greenhouse gas emitting energy. So talk about that a little.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a pretty old and dirty natural gas or methane or fossil gas burning power plant in eastern Travis County, so Decker Lake, that area. And it's the largest point source of air pollution in Travis County. So it is, in addition to kind of contributing to climate pollution, also just a big contributor to smog and soot and other kinds of pollution, causing direct human health impacts. And so there's been a push to close that plant for a long time. The goal was also to, I believe, close it by the end of this year. Now Austin Energy is saying they're going to just keep it open 3 months longer to get us through the winter, I guess again in fear that we may have a repeat of the February blackouts, and want to just kind of keep that generation to get us through the winter. So, ideally we would close it, at the end of the year as planned, but, I think a 3-month extension isn't the end of the world.
Mm-hmm. So that will be retired,
Yes.
eliminating that point source, like you mentioned, and is in our plans in order to reduce our overall greenhouse gas emissions. And then obviously, like, that is at a city park that has potential, obviously, to serve other community purposes,
Yeah, exactly. It's a beautiful area, and the power plant there is definitely an eyesore, and jeopardizes human health. For people living right around there, or recreating in the park. I know there's a lot of triathlons and other things around there, and so definitely don't want those athletes or anybody breathing that pollution. So it would be good to close that.
Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about closing these fossil fuel power generation sources, in light of what happened last winter, I think there's been a lot of confusion, like we can't do those things, that'll make us so we'll have more power blackouts, or you hear a lot of rumors on the internet, right? Can you talk about how we're able to close these older generation units? I know we're not closing Fayette, but how we're able to close places like Decker, but still have a strong power supply and an affordable power supply for residents of Austin?
Yeah, so the good news is that despite the setback, Austin's getting more than half of its electricity already from wind and solar power, and we know that tons of new wind and solar are being built at the states right now, and very affordably. The price of renewables has come down dramatically in the last decade, in part thanks to the big stimulus bill that passed Congress under President Obama, led to just a massive investment in renewable energy, and that helped bring the cost down, so that new wind and solar are actually, in some cases, cheaper than building a fossil fuel power plant. So they're quite affordable, and they do have their own challenges, right? Because if the wind isn't blowing or the sun isn't shining, we have to balance our where we're getting our energy from. But that's a challenge that we can absolutely meet, and that we've already started meeting. We just need to have a diversity of renewable sources. And I know, for example, Austin gets some of its energy from some South Texas wind farms that, and also some solar farms that, like the one in Weberville and elsewhere, that produce electricity when we need it the most, those, hot summer afternoons. And so, when we're talking about moving towards 100% renewable energy, I think a lot of the science is clear that we can absolutely get to 60, 70, 80% renewables, while still meeting all of our electricity reliability concerns. When we're talking about getting to the 80th and 90th, 100th, battery storage is going to be a key part of that. Batteries are still a little bit more expensive, so we need the prices of those to come down. Austin does own, for better or worse, a biomass power plant in Nacogdoches, which some people consider renewable. And the advantage of that is it runs, it can run 24 hours a day, right? So that's a source that could help us, achieve 100% renewable energy. When we're looking at, there's talk about doing offshore wind in the Gulf of Mexico. Interior Secretary Holland, just a few weeks ago announced that the Biden administration will start leasing the Gulf of Mexico for offshore wind as soon as next year. And the wind offshore, again, blows a lot during those afternoons when we need the electricity the most. So that's going to be another good complement potentially to Texas's electricity mix.
Yeah, and just to be clear, like in Austin, we do have a pretty high renewable percentage, but what you're talking about with that getting above 80%, that's what we're talking statewide, and we are nowhere near that at all,
Yeah,
not even
exactly. Right.
close to
Texas
that.
is only gets about 25% of our
Right.
electricity from wind and solar. So yeah, absolutely important to um, distinguish. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not close to hitting that that spot where we need to be concerned about having extra storage or different sources like that yet. We're nowhere
Exactly
near that.
right. Yeah, we're far from that. Like that's something is a legitimate concern, and we'll need to plan for that in the future. Right now, that's not a concern at all. You know, we're
Hmm.
far from there. You know, that being a reliability issue. And again, you know, during the blackout, you know, the federal government did an investigation, and they were clear that the overwhelming problem during the February freeze was that natural gas froze. You know, at the wellhead, natural gas plants. You know, because natural gas, you know, still provides most of our electricity. So that was overwhelming the problem with our grid reliability. So not renewables.
Right. So I want to talk more about Fayette again. You know, it's such a bummer. It's like I was just talking this morning actually with Travis County Commissioner Bridget Shea, and she is in Scotland right now for the COP26, or the Conference of Parties, the big UN climate conference, and talking about international goals and all the different ways that cities and towns across the world are reducing their emissions. And Austin just passed our new climate equity plan, which set us on this new goal of zero emissions by 2040, or net zero emissions by 2040, which is 10 years earlier than we had originally shot for. So a lot of great progress, and energy has actually been where we've shown the most progress um, in reducing our emissions, but this feels like a big setback. And I'm wondering, I know we still don't know a ton of information, but where do we go from here to still try and meet these goals? Because it seems like this makes it significantly harder to meet those goals.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one thing that the utilities, Austin Energy, said in their press release is that they can at least, even if they can't in the short term get out of the project completely, they can just significantly reduce the amount of electricity that they use from the plant and just operate it less. They have this program called REACH, which I forget what it stands for, but basically where they have self-imposed a carbon price on the coal plant. So they're deliberately making it more expensive to internally in order to account for the climate impact from the plant, right?
Mm.
Because that's probably the problem with electricity generation, is that there are all these costs that power plants cause, like in terms of killing people, right, and hospital
Mm-hmm.
bills and destruction of species and wildfires and all. There's all these costs from fossil fuel generation that aren't factored into the price of electricity, right? And so Austin is attempting to factor that in, and as a result, when they're deciding how to deploy, they generally want to deploy the cheapest form of energy, right, in order to help meet our affordability goals. They're kind of putting a thumb on the scale there, such that they wouldn't
Mm.
use the coal plant as frequently as it might be if you didn't factor in those health and climate costs, if that makes sense. So that's one thing that they said they're going to do. So they'll just basically commit to run it less. So that's one way that we get some climate benefit out of it. But yeah, I think long term, we need to just redouble our efforts to purchase more renewables. Again, we by investing more in renewables, we can sell more onto the grid. We have a climate benefit there by just putting more renewables on the grid. And since that's lower price than a lot of new generation, we can still influence the broader grid, even if that plant stays open. But then, yeah, long term, we just have to, I think we'll learn more on Monday. The utility is scheduled to testify before the Electric Utility Commission for the city of Austin. And I know the commissioners are going to be asking a lot of tough questions and recognizing that these negotiations were confidential, try and just get some more information from the utility, figure out exactly what LCRA was saying, and where can we go from here to try and get out of this plant.
Yeah. And then just more broadly, for Environment Texas, you all do a lot of advocacy work around climate and environmental issues. What are you all focusing on right now when it comes to climate that maybe people can get involved in or learn more about?
Well, I think the most exciting opportunity right now are the two bills in Congress. So the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which includes historic levels of funding for public transit, for electric vehicle charging infrastructure, for grid resilience, and clean energy. So that passing that bill is highly important for the climate. And then also the Build Back Better Act, which congressional Democrats are negotiating, which would include close to $600 billion in investments in clean energy and climate action. So those are together with some of the EPA regulations that have been proposed this week. The Biden administration proposed regulating methane emissions from oil and gas. Methane is a very potent greenhouse gas, very damaging to our climate. So if Congress passes those two bills in combination with the methane regulations and in combination with what the Biden administration has proposed down the road around power plants and other sources of emissions, that would just be historic, the most the U.S. has ever done on climate change. So I think, people can, most important thing right now this week is, calling members of Congress and telling them to pass those two bills. And the other things we're looking at are, particularly if any of your viewers are from outside of Austin, we need other Texas cities to join, in. And one thing that we're pushing is kind of a public option for renewable energy in the deregulated electric market. So for folks that live outside of Austin, chances are you get your electricity in the deregulated electric market. So you get to choose which electric company you want to sell you power. And, one option is for Texas cities to form a public option for renewable energy that you could choose from. You would choose either the City of Houston Renewable Energy Plan, or you would choose TXU or Energy or whatever the other plans are in the market. And we think that by providing a public option for renewable electricity, that could both lead to more investment in renewables, but it would also create some competition among the for-profit electric companies to get them to force them to do better in terms of meeting clean energy, because we know that Texans overwhelmingly support wind and solar. There was a poll done after the blackouts in February, and the poll asked what should be the #1 goal for Texas energy policy. And what 56% of Texans said was it should be achieving 100% clean energy. So Texans get it. People, love wind and solar. They want to have an electric grid that's cleaner for our health and for our children's future. So we think that if cities in the deregulated market created some competition, we could achieve some really great things. So that's another thing that we're focused on.
And that would be, you're just working on kind of building engagement around that right now. That would be something that the legislature would have to approve or something like that?
No, actually,
no?
It's already allowed under Texas law, under the Public Utility Commission rules. What would happen is, say, the City of Houston would, which already has, sends bills to their trash customers or their wastewater customers. They could insert in the bill saying, hey, we have this new program where we're going to sell you 100% renewable energy. It's going to come from a community solar farm that we're building here. You can get all your electricity from it, and it's cheaper than what you could get on the regular, marketplace.
Oh, so it's already allowed. It's just no cities are doing it yet.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so we're trying to get a city to kind of pilot a program. We think it's real promising in terms of, allowing cities to provide cheaper, cleaner power to their residents.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, and if people want to learn more about Environment Texas in general, what's a good way for them to connect with you all?
Yeah, well, follow us on Instagram here, and certainly our website, environmenttexas.org. Those would be two great places.
Yeah, and just that Build Back Better, those two bills in Congress, just to reinforce that a bit more, obviously it's a national policy, but I could see a world where a lot of that funding would come right down to Austin, and a lot of the projects we've been working on, since we're already pretty far ahead there, I think there's a direct local benefit potentially to those
Absolutely,
things passing
yeah.
as well.
Those kind of projects definitely favor the shovel-ready projects, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Austin's got a lot of them. In fact, we're already digging up, the city for light rail, right? Project Connect, which when voters approved it last year, the understanding was that we would get a federal match to actually build it. So we still need to get that some of those federal dollars. And like I mentioned, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, includes the largest investment in public transit ever. So we can get some of that money for Project Connect to build light rail in the city. Amtrak is talking about expanding rail service from Dallas to Austin, San Antonio to Houston. There's a high-speed rail proposal from Dallas to Houston that could benefit from the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And then the Build Back Better Act separately, also, we could get tons of money, funding for expanding electric vehicle rebates to as much as $12,500, and investments in energy efficiency, wind and solar. Austin definitely stands to get a lot of money from both of those bills.
Okay. And so just to recap, Fayette not shutting down immediately or at the timetable we wanted, which is a pretty big setback, but not, I guess, doesn't totally squash all of our climate plans. There's potential for us to kind of keep focused. And I guess if people want to stay engaged on this, it seems like City Council will certainly have something to say soon, and to keep an eye on that Electric Utility Commission, which is a resident group, right, of a commission here, like our boards and commissions. And they'll be asking some questions on Monday to figure out how we can make sure we're still try and figure out how to meet goals.
Yeah, and I think that meeting should be live streamed. So if people Google Austin Electric Utility Commission, you should be able to find information about how to observe that meeting and learn more about Fayette, learn more what we can do to get City Council to keep the pressure on LCRA to let us out of the deal.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. I really appreciate you giving folks that update.
Absolutely. It was good to see you. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye.